is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He keeps having good mail days, Stu Horvath.
It's true. I love a mail day that has toys in it. I'm not gonna lie.
All I get is like bills, you know? I get bills and like Kickstarters that I forgot that I backed, which is always good. That's always fun. It's like, ooh, that's fun. I didn't even know I bought that 2 years ago. But you got something actually really cool in the mail.
I did. I pre-ordered the Super 7 ReAction figures for D&D. And man, well, okay. So first of all, let's talk about what ReAction is. ReAction is like Super 7's 3.5-inch or 3.25-inch action figure line. They are spawned from the days of yore. 5 points of articulation. They are modeled after like the old Star Wars toys, and like basically any action figure from like the late 70s to early 80s, where they were just they had the stiff arms, stiff legs. They're designed as a total nostalgia trigger. The idea early on with the ReAction line was to license everything that you loved from your childhood and convert it into a Star Wars compatible scale action figure. So, you get like Efreeti from The Thing and Ripley from Alien and like the guy from Ghost and the Crimson Ghost from the Misfits. Like everything has a Super 7 figure.
Devo has a Super 7 figure.
Yeah.
Dio also has a Super 7 figure.
And so what's the Dio demon's name?
So I actually have that page pulled up right now. Murray,
that's right. Yeah, Murray's got a figure. It's like Funko Pops except cool.
Yeah.
Sort of. I never got into like the film and pop culture reactions. For me personally, they're just slightly too expensive.
Yeah, I could never see you buying a Sid Vicious ReAction figure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just yeah. Even these, I feel like they're $15 toys, and they retail for $20. It's like it's $5 too much. Like if they were $15, I would buy so many of these.
Yeah,
I already buy so many of these. But anyway, they hooked me, and I had been buying the Super 7 Ultimates of the Conan toys. Those are great. I love them. They're not $15. They got me to pre-order a chair for not $15 last year. Looking forward to that arriving. We're not even going to talk about that because that's going to be a whole different podcast episode. If you know, you know.
Yeah, we're almost 5 years in. We got to stretch it out, folks.
So because I was getting those email drops for the Conan figures, I was getting other Super 7 email newsletters. Like I needed that, and they kind of hooked me on their worst figures. The idea behind the worst is their ReAction figures, their scale, same thing, 5 points of articulation, kind of like stiff looking. But the idea behind the worst is that they're the worst supervillains, and they're all original designs, and they look so good. They are just there's a design sense at play that is original yet also like deeply referential, and they are some of the coolest bad guys I've ever seen. King Hell is like this skeleton tarantula demon guy. He would have been the bad guy in everything when I was a kid. There's a pirate who's like a space pirate. There's like a guy with a gas gun who's sort of like creepily like the Zodiac Killer, a man-eating luchador tiger. They're just so good. And I've slowly been buying up the Frankenghost. Like it was right there all those years and no one did it. And then all of a sudden we have a Frankenghost.
Yeah. And they make them like glow in the dark as well. Like there's all different series,
different colorways. Yeah. They're fantastic though.
Backings that look like the old Remco Universal monster backs. Like,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that is a deep problem that I have with the Super 7 ReAction line, is that I believe that toys should be taken out of the package and like fiddled with. But Super 7 makes some really nice packaging. It's really difficult for me. And so I had a real hard time taking these D&D figures out of the packages. They look so good. So anyway, it was announced deep into the worst And then they announced that they were doing a set of 3 Dungeons and Dragons inspired ReAction figures. The line, I guess, is kind of called "The Adventure Is Yours," riffing on the an old D&D tagline. There's 3. They're old school designs. It's the Efreeti from the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Sorceress, who is on the Erol Otus Basic box set cover, and the Githyanki from Fiend Folio. When I initially saw them, I guess I don't think that they're promotional photos or photos. I think that they're renders, like from whatever CAD software they use to like mock these things up. And they look almost photorealistic, but for some reason they never look quite right to me. I think that this is true of the Conan line. They look better in person than they did in the promo photos, which is weird because the promo photos are supposed to like look really good, to the point that I was going to buy all 3, but I only really wanted the Githyanki. I thought that the Githyanki was the one that like looked right.
Yeah.
But once I got them in hand, they are all of the same level of quality. They are all 3 of them fantastic figures. I never really thought that this was going to work, but it does. And I want so many more of them without being able to pinpoint exactly who I want, ripped from a retro old classic module cover and turned into like a old retro style action figure. But I do. I want tons of these.
Well, I mean, like when I heard, of course, my Instagram sponsored ads led me to understand and know that these were coming out like way ahead of time, because that's how they get me. It's how I get my handsome guy jackets. It's how I got my cowboy boots. It's how like, oh wow, this thing that actually like helps you get cat hair out of the rug. Like, I'm like, but I never spoke these words out loud, but they know what I need. And I saw these and I was like, oh God, because it's not just that like they're cool looking action figures. They're cool looking action figures that are visual representations of some of the greatest D&D art ever made, right?
Yeah.
Like when you think of the artists that put these things on the cover, like these are like the Mount Rushmore of old school D&D artists. And like to have a figure come out that looks like so good and on par with the work on that cover, like it's uncanny. Shout out to Super 7, man, because you did it.
So strange, because I never would have expected this stuff to translate right. And they aren't exact translations, but they capture the spirit of the thing in 3 dimensions in a way that I'm really astounded by. I really cannot I can't understate how good these figures look. And the whole thing, I said that ReAction was sort of nostalgia bait, but and in a way, I think that a lot of it is making you yearn for a period of time that you can never reimagine or recapture. Childhood's gone. We have to move on, and you see like a McCready figure, and you kind of like go back to like when you first saw the thing or when you were still playing with action figures, and you get a warm fuzzy feeling. But the thing that I think about with these Dungeons and Dragons toys is that they really feel like toys for a childhood that didn't exist. And it's a strange sort of like, it's not nostalgia, because nostalgia is a yearning for something you've experienced and lost. But like it's something even worse. It's something that you've lost and never had, and you can sort of recognize how cool it would have been if we had gotten toys like this in this style in the 80s. It's a real strange vibration these things have.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is a vibe that's like missing, not from these toys, but just like from toys in the 80s in general, where we look back to that nostalgia pop, because you're right, we're never going to get it back. It's never coming back. It was a moment in time. That moment in time has passed. However, there was always that thing where very few companies back in the 80s and the 90s, and when people were growing up and like these toys were coming out, that I think really ever thought more than, okay, this is just what needs to be out right now in this moment. And it's almost like immediately disposable.
Yeah.
Right. And yet the things that we come back to, the things that really like stand that test of time, where we're like, oh, this is giving me all those like the feelings that I had from, you know, when I was a kid. Like it often comes from, I think, the place of, you know, dialing back into the feeling of the moment then, and that place and time versus like something that, like, you know, you see some stuff nowadays, you're like, man, that's cool. Like that's going to be cool like 20 years from now. Like you just kind of, like, you can tell when someone just kind of puts their thumb right on the pulse and of the vibe of like what something is, and something that is like immediately a hit. But now it's, you know, looking back, you're like, yeah, they were just throwing shit at the wall, and like this happens to be what's stuck, and this happens to be what, like, you know, is that immediate anchor to that one moment on that one day in that one town that I was in, and this is it, you know. And it's interesting. It's definitely interesting, because now, like, with these Super 7 figures, and now with other stuff that's coming out like in that vein, like, I mean, Super 7's just crushing it. They're taking it forward. So, you know, you're going to buy this, and you're going to know this moment where you kind of were able to find that line that takes you all the way back to that place and time specifically, and kind of like peek back and like, okay, like this is a new moment where you get to revisit again. And it's nice. It's a cool little portal back to a place, back to another place.
Yeah, the original Super 7 ReAction line, you know, with the movie figures and stuff, was a smart but also easy kind of decision. It's a, you know, chocolate and peanut butter, two things mixed together, and, you know, they become something even better. But over time, with the aging of the line, you're right, there's an intentionality and like a keen understanding of what's cool and why these things appealed to people that is on display in the worst, which is totally original, and then these D&D figures, and in something else I want to talk about in a second that I just think is really impressive. And it's just something we didn't have as a kid. Toys were for kids, and that was it. And like, you're right, they were disposable. It was a cash grab. It was like that cartoon to TV commercial to toy store pipeline that was built and assembled solely for the purpose of squeezing as much money out of parents as possible. But now, like, the toy lines are sort of free from that. Well, not all toy lines, but like the NECA and the Super 7, where they're making toys that have like a different set of purposes in their designs. You know, these are actually labeled, this is not a toy, but a collector's item and not suitable for children. The product may contain breakable, sharp-edged and small parts. And it's true. And you can kind of feel it. Some of them don't necessarily feel like they would hold up to play, like kid play, you know, but they'll still look good on the shelf. I just think that's cool. I think that this is a place that toys have never been in. And for a long time, I felt like toys were sort of kind of like preying on a collector mentality that just wasn't contributing anything to the larger culture. And I've changed my tune. I think that these toys are cool. And they are their own really interesting and special art form. And I have to say, as soon as I got the Dungeons and Dragons reactions, they were so good that I was sitting on the fence in regards to another set of reaction figures, Super 7 reaction figures, which is the pre-code line, 4 horrible little toys designed after cover creatures from horror comics from the pre-code comic book era.
Oh, yeah.
So you have Commander Ben Woodruff, who's basically like a ghost astronaut. You have the seaweed monster from Baffling Mysteries. You have the Graveyard Ghoul from Chilling Tales. And you have Radium Man from Black Cat Mystery, which is basically a guy holding a bar of radium, and it's like melting his face off. These are gnarly, gnarly toys, but they are also like extremely detailed and like really gorgeous sculptural products. Like I cannot, the seaweed guy is just like a fish guy with like a beard of seaweed. He looks kind of doofy, but the scale texture on him is just fantastic. And same with Ben Woodruff's tattered spacesuit. Like it's got all these holes in it, and it's just like there's a textural quality to it that's just fantastic. But I bring this up not just to showcase my obsession with cool toys. I bring this up specifically because I think that there might be a tangential connection to Dungeons and Dragons here. I'm not particularly familiar with the pre-code comics, other than, you know, they look cool. I've read some, but like it was never something that was in reach as a kid, so I don't have much nostalgia for it. But the Graveyard Ghoul has a very specific look to him. Now, the toy itself is just a great little leering creature. You can totally believe that this guy eats corpses. But it's really the art on the card that is noteworthy. Basically, each of the cards has, original comic art from the period. And this guy, Jeff Black, one of my followers on Instagram, pointed this out, looks alarmingly like the David Sutherland illustration for the Ghoul in the Monster Manual, to the point where I saw it and I was just like, oh yeah, I can see that. And now every time I look at it, he's got the same hunch and like the
He
same
really does.
mouth. There's something really, I think that Sutherland had this in the back of his mind when he did that illustration. And I love, we'll never know a lot of this stuff, but it's another follower was mentioning that they watched the Sinbad movie with the flying homunculuses and was just like, that's why homunculuses have wings in Dungeons and Dragons, because Harryhausen put wings on them. And it's like, I don't know that for sure,
But you want to believe it's so bad.
I'm pretty sure that that's the case.
Yeah.
And every once in a while in pop culture, you unearth this thing, and you can see the connection between, or the potential connection between 2 points. And I think that that's super cool. And I would not have ever been informed of that or noticed it on my own without Super 7. And that's pretty cool.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me right back. And now they're buying friggin' toys again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited about it. I think Super 7 does great stuff. We are obviously not sponsored by Super 7. We just like to put over stuff that we like and that we think is cool, and they happen to make cool stuff. And the fact that they've pivoted from making just right over the plate, like Parks and Recreation figures and licensed properties like that is really cool. I think it's a cool pivot that you can only achieve once you've kind of built up the following by making all that licensed stuff. So good on them for moving away and making this really weird shit. Stu, any final thoughts on these figures?
It's like the opposite of Funko, right? Yeah, the Parks and Rec figures paid the bills, and they allowed for this this cool explosion of creative product to be made that otherwise wouldn't have been. Whereas Funko made soulless licensed products and then bought Mondo and ruined it. It's just they just decided that we're going to devour cool stuff and make the world worse.
Yeah, man. Sometimes you don't walk away from a fight.
Yeah.
And there you go. Well, this is another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG. And you can bet your butt that I'm going to be posting these next year.
Yeah. Way down the line. If you all were on Instagram over the weekend previous, Stu had a thing where you could ask questions, and he actually showed how far in advance this stuff is planned out in one of the pictures. It's far. He's not kidding when he's like, oh yeah, this is next year. We're already looking towards 2025 at this point.
Yeah, I got so many people using the emoji with the brain popping out of the top of the head in response to that. People really think that I'm kidding, and I'm not.
Yeah, thank God for spreadsheets. Also on Stu's social media, you can pre-order Stu's book, Monsters, Aliens, and Holes in the Ground.
A guide to tabletop role-playing games from Dungeons and Dragons to Mothership. It's called, picked Mothership. This was a question that was asked over the weekend or over the holiday. I picked Mothership because I feel like Mothership is the birth, or at least the clarification of the zine movement, which I feel is fueling our current golden moment in role-playing games. So perhaps not the most up-to-date because we go to 2020, but perhaps the most important in a historical lens.
I love it.
Yeah, a little tidbit for you.
You can find me on the internet, John McGuire RPG, Instagram, the Twitters. Maybe if I get a code for Blue Sky, I'll join Blue Sky. I'm everywhere. I'm doing stuff more. I'm going places. Things are happening. If you want to pick up anything from 321 Action and get over to Exalted Funeral, you're going to shop there anyway. And Exalted Funeral has the best stuff, including my books from 321 Action. Devil in New Jersey will be on sale soon. If you're over at Exalted Funeral, also check out the Vorpal Almanac. It's from Planet X Games and Sally Canarino. Levi did all the words. Sally did all the art. It's just a bunch of swords that you can use in old school essentials. It is super, super cool with a foil limited edition cover as well. So definitely check that out over Exalted Funeral. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. If you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. You get early release episodes at some point on Friday. Last week, no new episode. We had a lot of stuff going on, so we could not pop out a new one, but it was the Erol Otus rerun, which was amazing. But you get episodes before everyone else gets them at some point on Friday, depending on when we get it to Alex, so then Alex can get it back to us. We have behind the scenes look at Stu's book. We got a behind the scenes look at 3-2 in action. We have a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. Some tiers also include joining in on Stu's West Marches game. This month I ran Aliens, or actually last month, because it's July now, but in June I ran Aliens for the patrons. It went better than expected, but it could have gone a lot worse. So yeah, we run games for everyone. We have a great time over there. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, because your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.